So I am excited to kick off day 2 and welcome Mustafa. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for joining me today. So I'm the CTO at Coursera, and I'm excited to talk about AI's transformation impact on education and some of the learnings we've had in Coursera. So I'll just start off with a question for the group, which is like, how many of you have used some form of AI or generative AI in the last 2 months for learning or in instruction design? Pretty much everyone. So uh, I think one question I always had in my mind when this generative AI revolution was happening, especially after ChatGPT came out, is how much of this is hype versus real. And I've heard both spectrums of it. So I'm just going to share some research and then also share some real impact that we've seen uh, while working on this in Coursera. So if you look at this recent study from McKinsey, AI has the potential to unlock about $4.4 trillion in productivity gains. Um, on highly skilled jobs. So this is the first time we're seeing that highly skilled jobs are, um, going to have some sort of transformation in the next few years because of this technology. So where does education stand in this? Right, I believe that education is going to be one of the fields where AI can have some of the most profound impacts by empowering teachers and learners. So for students, AI creates new learning and economic opportunity. For instance, job postings have increased by about 20x for generative AI skills. And many leaders are saying that they would rather hire experienced folks with AI skills than ones without. You can also see that wages for AI skills have been going up. So the message is clear. AI is not just the future of technology; it's the future of work as well. For students, the ability to learn AI skills is not just about becoming competitive in the job market. As you can see here in a lot of surveys, half the students agree that learning AI skills is going to be critical for their future careers, and half the students are already using AI in their coursework, and it's no longer a future trend, right? It looks like it's a present reality. So I'm going to talk about three categories here where AI is driving real impact today. And in some cases, we'll also see how it's driving some uh, impact where we can see glimpses of the future of how AI will play a role here. So let's start with reach, which is one of the most exciting potentials of AI, which is already having an impact. So if you think about the impact of AI, the impact is particularly pronounced in emerging economies. In countries like Mexico, India, and Brazil, we are seeing huge year-over-year growth on AI-related enrollments. And this growth is not just a statistical rise; it's a testament on how AI is leveling the playing field across the globe. For instance, Coursera data shows that learners in these regions are increasingly accessing content related to generative AI. So you can see that the way AI is enabling this reach is mainly by enabling translations at scale and also other use cases like transcriptions, live transcriptions, or uh, other modalities like audio being possible now. AI translation tools are already making a significant difference. In Coursera alone, we now have translated about 4,000 plus courses in 21 plus languages. And you can see how the cost has gone down from about $13,000 per course to $20. This has enabled us to scale translations globally. And not just that, we've seen enrollments in machine translated content go up, which means that we're able to reach a broader set of learners using machine translation, and we're able to translate a course in a matter of hours now. And this is across assessments, video transcripts, and many types of items. So the second category I want to talk about is how AI is enabling the same content to be approachable to many different kinds of learners. So beyond language, AI is also transforming how content is being delivered and consumed. So if you think about multimodal learning experiences, which is combining text, audio, and video, it can cater to many different learner needs or preferences in how they can absorb the content that is being taught to them. This multimodal approach not only improves engagement, it also ensures better knowledge retention. I just wanted to share a couple of examples here. I'm sure some of you have heard of Notebook LM, but this is an example which is quite fascinating, where a more engaging kind of learning, which is podcasts, can be applied to any kind of content, any source, and this can be applied at scale. So when you want to consume some content and podcast is the way that you prefer to learn, you can do that leveraging AI. Or the example of Duolingo, where you can now practice with an AI avatar and have a language session with your AI avatar to study for a Spanish exam, for example. For learners is by personalized. So let's talk about at a high level, what personalization means, right? Often, what it means is, as a learner, you have a certain starting point, and then you have a goal. And then the paths you take to get to your goal can differ based on your credentials, based on your prior learning experience, and also based on the kind of learning that you prefer, right? It could be text, audio, it could be a podcast, right? One of the ways that AI helps is you can get advice and guidance throughout that career journey that you just saw using something called Coach, which is just an example that we're using in Coursera, which helps you figure out which course you want to take next. You can also have a conversation about what's the compare different kinds of content, or also have a conversation about, hey, like, I have these prerequisites, I have these skills. Is this the right course for me? Not just that, once you are in the course, you can also ask a question now, which is similar to raising a hand in a classroom and asking a question. And you can see in this case, you can ask a question about something in the course related to the role that you're trying to get to, and get an answer. Now, in my experience, this is not usually not as good as a human tutor, for sure. But when you're trying to do this at scale, and when you cannot give access to a human tutor to everyone, even getting 70% of the value can drive a lot of great outcomes for learners. So if you go inside the course a lot more, we also have this example of grading that we've been able to leverage AI for. And you can see here that the feature, roughly the way it works, is that your peers grade you inside of a non-credit course. And usually, if you don't have enough peers in the classroom, in the online classroom, then you have to wait very long, and many times this feedback is not high quality either, right? So we've been able to use AI to auto grade these essays and assignments, and have gotten really good feedback from learners. One important aspect here that we have is, if the learners are actually dissatisfied, so firstly, be transparent that this is being graded by AI. And then secondly, if the learners are dissatisfied, they can actually fall back to requesting a human review. This kind of intentional experience is also very important as you build AI experiences, because then you can mitigate some of the drawbacks of generative AI. So I just wanted to share some of the impact we've seen on Coach. Right, 89% of people who have been surveyed have said that they're highly satisfied with the support that they're getting from Coach. We also see that efficiency in learning has gone up significantly, where course completions or learners wanting to spend more time on learning has gone up because of this technology. And this is a recent statistic that I just pulled up yesterday, actually, which shows how real the AI graded assessment feature is. We've graded about 1 million submissions in total on Coursera using AI. So let's talk a little bit about how we are extending this to educators and assisting everyone to enable teaching as well. So we spoke a lot about how learners can use different mediums like audio, video, text. Um, on the instructor side, one of the things we've done is you can now create a program or a course using generative AI. So in this case, you can say that you have a certain job role or a certain skill set that you want to teach on, and you can use generative AI as a starting point to create a syllabus. And if you have content that you want to match this to, AI can help do that as well. Where generative AI is not yet good at is creating the content itself, right? So that's where it lacks right now. But you can see how this can empower instructors to create content, or even in this case, it's learning and development officers who need to teach a certain skill set in their organization. This is an example of Coursera Course Builder, where you can either start with a syllabus, or you can start with a set of content that you have, and then use an AI guided approach uh, to build a course. Now, this is one of the early examples of an agentic workflow, right? And what is an agentic workflow? Some might ask, which is there are many different answers to this, but in at a high level, it is an AI technology being able to listen to human English instructions and do a complex set of tasks, mostly autonomously, right? So in this case, you can see that the English instructions can be, I want to teach a course that shows me how to read a profit and loss statement, and then using that in English instructions, the AI agent can follow multiple set of tasks to get to the outcome. And that can be things like text to audio. It can be translations. It can be matching content to your goals. So there are about, I think, 15 different steps we do here before we get to the end outcome. The other important thing here is that a lot of these experiences work really well when you do it iteratively, right? You don't want to do it where you have an English instruction and then you get the answer, right? You want human input at various steps, and so human assisted experiences tend to be really, really important in this case, and tend to work much better. And this is another example of how we can embed instruction design into the course. We've partnered with Michigan on this quite a bit, but if you've used custom GPTs in OpenAI or GEMS in Google Gemini, you can create a custom coach experience with private context, and you can also set the persona and also some rubric where you can say that these are the things that you want to test for, and then coach will actually embed into the learning experience and talk to the learner about that concept, and then mark milestones as you progress. For this experience, we're very excited to I think what's going to happen in the future is this is going to move to having audio, video, and different modalities, and also enable you to contextualize this more and more as you move forward. As you can see, this is an example of how you can transfer the same experience into audio mode, if that's what the learner prefers as the medium of learning. So this one is one of those examples that I wanted to share, which is not I've not seen that be real yet, and I think there is some technology gaps where I don't think this is actually possible right now. But if you think about cohort-based learning, especially in an online environment, it's really hard to do that without a lot of human intervention and support, and so it's hard to scale that kind of an experience. But if you imagine in the future, you could think of enabling peer interaction or fostering group activities or personalized nudges, all of which is required to enable a good cohort-based online learning experience using different AI agents or different AI bots, right? So each of these could be different AI experiences working together to enable this cohort-based experience. Again, this kind of thing is I have not seen this be real yet, but I have seen parts of this work really well so far. So the three things I shared are show you how AI is already having an impact and also a glimpse into the future. But I also wanted to share a little bit about how using this technology requires all of us to be intentional and also we have responsibility in like how we use this technology and how we also educate others on using this. I have mentioned human in the loop a few times. I feel like that is a critical element to this, and one of the guiding principles that we've used at Coursera to guide our work in generative AI. And there are applications where it's more critical workflows where humans have to actually approve the output before we show it to the learner. And when we started working on the generative AI roadmap and strategy at Coursera, this is the first thing that we wrote as a team. And the reason this was important to us was because we wanted to do it in the right way, making sure that we work with our partners, we work with universities to respect all the ownership and attribution characteristics that Coursera has always been known for, and also use data in the right way. So, we don't do any training, for example, we only use the content for grounding, right? So it's input, output, we're not storing that data anywhere. We also want to make sure that we take a lot of steps to enable collaboration with universities so that we're doing this in a way where we roll it out in steps in partnership with our partners. And then we want to also make sure privacy and security for learners is a huge aspect of this, where they're able to control some of that AI experiences. And like I was showing in the earlier slides, also being transparent to the learner when we're using AI in certain workflows and when we're not. So we can think of using AI for solving a lot of the academic integrity challenges as well. And this has given rise to more academic integrity challenges, this technology. But we've also seen being able to use AI to mitigate some of these challenges. So here you can see that one of the features we've tried that's worked really well is using AI to do this thing called an integrity check, right? So it's not, generative AI can definitely help with, mitigating cheating, right? By doing video proctoring in a very scaled way. But in this case, it actually helps the learners understand the value of, understanding the concept and understanding it deeply, and really encourages them to go through this experience so that they get a full understanding of the concept that they're trying to learn. And then we can share this result on how the learner is doing in terms of understanding these concepts back to the instructor, creating a feedback loop between the instructor and learner so that we encourage this kind of deep learning in this world of generative AI. So to summarize, I just wanted to share these three categories again of how AI is transforming education with broadening reach, enhancing engagement, and also how it can transform the future with some of the things I shared towards the end. I do think some of the impact is already there. It is real, as most of you raised your hand when I asked that question. And so I'm excited about what the future entails for education in general. And I just wanted to end with this quote, which is very dear to me, as one of the primary goals in Coursera has been to democratize education, which is talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And AI really helps us move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa. We're going to bring Professor Chris Brooks and Professor Xu Wang up. They're going to have a discussion about the topic, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end. So go ahead, grab these mics. They're turned off, so you can flip them. They're pretty hot, so just give yourself a little room there. Thanks.
Thanks very much. That was a wonderful talk. So I'll give a quick introduction and some reflections and comments, then pass it to Shu, and then maybe we'll ask you a few questions. So I'm Chris Brooks. I'm associate professor at the School of Information. I've taught a number of courses on Coursera. In fact, my principal teaching here at the University of Michigan is in our online degree program, which is on Coursera. And all of my teaching this year is on Coursera through that program. So I've gotten to become very familiar with the platform and the tools. I'm a computer scientist by background, and my principal area of scholarship is learning analytics. And so I'm interested in integrating technologies like this into my classroom, whether it's in person or online. And so I've got a little bit of a research program around these topics as well. So I wanted to share a couple of examples of how Gen AI, I'm seeing Gen AI used here largely at Michigan, but through these platforms, just to give some thoughts to folks. So one example is in domain-based tools for support. In my courses, students are generally training to become data scientists. They're using the Jupyter Notebook platform. In our research lab, we've augmented this platform with Gen AI, but not through a chat interface as you might be used to. Instead, there's just a couple of buttons for every question on the assignment. And those buttons say, I want a planning hint, I want a debugging hint, and I want an optimization hint. And students can only ask for a few of these. And what we've been finding is that this really reduces the friction to using Gen AI in a thoughtful and pedagogical way, because we control all the prompts. So we wrote the prompts. I guess I feel it's thoughtful, right? And my research team. We wrote the prompts. We provide that scaffolding. We say, don't give an answer, give an explanation, focus on these values, and so forth. All students have to do is press the button. And that's nice. And it's a little different than copying and pasting into ChatGPT and then saying, help me be productive and solve this. And there was a note to academic integrity there at the end. And I think that these are interesting times for academic integrity, but also for us to rethink what we actually mean by that. So this dovetails to a second example. And this one's actually my daughter. She's 12. We signed up for Google Gemini in the household, I don't know, 3 days ago. And she said, oh, Dad, I used that thing in Google Docs. I'm like, oh, that's cool. What did you think? She's like, it was good. It wasn't perfect, but it was okay. And I emailed it to myself. And I'm like, okay. Again, she's 12. I said, so what did you ask it about? And she said, well, I asked it to pretend it was a character from some historical time and to write me something, give me a quote. And I said, well, that sounds kind of like an assignment. So how'd it do? And she said, I wasn't as good as the one I did, but I sent it to myself anyway. I said, so are you allowed to do that? And she's like, oh yeah, we can use Google. And I'm like, oh. Google Docs, yes, of course. Google Search, yes, of course. Google Gemini, it's in Google Docs, right? So the lines are very blurred, right? And actually, I don't know what she's doing with this, if she's to be doing that, and if this is now a new form of scholarship. And so I'm old enough to have gone through the days when people said, you can't go to Wikipedia and grab that stuff that's written by random people on the internet, right? It'll be interesting to watch. Bringing it back to Michigan, I teach in this Master's of Applied Data Science. One of my students, brand new to this program, said, hey, I'm not using ChatGPT for any of this stuff. And I said, okay, you don't have to, certainly don't have to use it for anything. He's like, yeah, I've never used it. I'm like, really? What? Why? And he's like, well, I don't want to run into any problems. I don't want to copy. I want everything to be my own work. I said, you're going to come out of this program with a master's degree from Michigan in applied data science. You have to know what Gen AI is. You have to have used Gen AI. You don't have to use it for your assignments, but you must be aware of these technologies. Your job will undoubtedly be to use these technologies in novel and interesting ways. is petrified by fear of plagiarism, of doing something wrong when it came to learning. Right. So those are a couple of ways I've seen Gen AI being used, and a couple of challenges that are coming up with those uses, both from novel research in specific domains all the way down to, kids growing up with this as a primary feature that they have on their phones, their tablets, and so forth. That very rapidly they're forming an opinion about the validity of that in just everyday life, in interactions, scholarly or otherwise. So, Shu, I'd like to turn it to you.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for the enlightening talk. I really enjoyed it. And thanks, Chris, for sharing your thoughts. So related to the point on personalized learning and also on the project Chris mentioned about generating a hint for the data science MOOC, we're also doing something related to generating feedback for students' written assignments. By the way, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Xu Wang. I'm an assistant professor in computer science and engineering. I work on education technologies and human-computer interaction. And one specific interest is on authoring of intelligent tutoring system. The motivation behind it is to personalize learning to a larger audience. And so we are partnering with Dr. Mitchell Dudley, who teaches Introduction to Economics. And he has a lot of writing assignments where students explain economics concepts in this course. And usually there are writing fellows who are undergraduate students who have taken this before to provide feedback to students' essays. And what we're experimenting with now is to have AI generate a draft of feedback, and the writing fellows will see these feedback and then provide feedback to the students. So we're doing a soft launch in the fall where writing fellows will still write feedback as usual, but they will see our feedback, the AI feedback afterwards, to not bias them anyways. And if we are seeing positive outcomes, we might try to provide them with the AI feedback during their feedback provision process. So what we're seeing right now is that because for this assignment, for this course, the instructors have very detailed rubrics like you should mention binding, non-binding price floors. With these very detailed rubrics, AI is actually quite good at evaluating the correctness of the student answers, like detecting whether the student fulfills or does not fulfill that rubric. So the assessment part, I think, is good. But I think AI is having challenges on generating good feedback messages. So what we're seeing is that AI might mention you should explain something. So AI might have the risk of telling the student what is the thing they should write instead of asking a thoughtful question for them to guide their thinking. So this is something we're trying to improve now. So a possible mitigation might be the instructor would write some feedback template, and then we can use the AI to send a detector as in whether the student is missing or is fulfilling this rubric, and then that is used to populate that feedback template, which will be sent to the students. And also related to the point you made about human in the loop, this is also a big theme in my own work. We've done a lot of teacher AI collaborative mechanisms to help teachers come up with teaching materials. One research thread is to help teacher generate questions. So one specific project is we are trying to help instructors of college classes create reading questions for their assigned readings to help students read more effectively. And what we observed is that when we present teachers with automatically generated questions, that is automatically generated by powerful AI tools, it actually takes them more time because they would have to verify, is this option correct or incorrect? They have to map each of the generated options to the original text to verify the accuracy. So they actually preferred our human AI teaming approach where the instructors would select the input in the original text and then apply some transformations, like they would paraphrase a sentence or negate a sentence, so they know what are the input for each of the options. So when they are deciding the input and they have the opportunity to directly edit the output during the process, they found this to actually be saving their time in comparison to directly viewing automatically generated content. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
So why don't I start with a first question here, which I think picks up on this last bit. And I was trying to decide how provocative to be with respect to this question. So I'll tone it down a bit here and see if I can amp it up towards the end. And that is human in the loop. Is it needed in the longer term, or is it a momentary stopgap because the technology is not perfect? That is, do we see that being something we need now because the technologies have these issues with hallucination or just incorrect responses or retrieval problems? Or do we believe that in 5 years, actually, there's going to be a lot more automation and a lot more ability for these agents to act independently of the instructor?
Yeah, I can start. I feel like at a high level, I have seen that these technologies work well when there is a domain expert in that field that's kind of guiding the AI in the right way, right? So similar to some of the examples you shared in the beginning, I think when I'm using AI to in some data science flows, right? Because I want to do some business analysis on some data. Uh, if I didn't know some of the basics of statistics and foundational knowledge, I think I would actually go in the wrong direction and use it in the wrong way. So in the short term, I definitely think human in the loop is the right thing to do. I also think there's a spectrum on the applications, right? There are some applications like for credit grading where it's absolutely necessary, right? And there might be some which is like, okay, you're asking a question about a topic, and you don't necessarily need, like the coach example you saw. It might be okay to not have human in the loop and have some post processing on doing analysis and red teaming on the input output. With respect to agents, I think one way to think about this is like, will these AI agents, like there was this O1 preview model that came out recently that's able to apply some thinking before it does anything, right? And so one way to frame that question is like, how far are AI models from being able to think like humans, right? Would be more provocative in that question. And I think that will be a while. I don't think I don't think we're close to that. I think the technology advancements are going pretty fast, but I don't see it being close to how humans think, especially when there are domain experts.
Yeah, I have similar take on this one. So if we go back to like one of the early method that is used for human expertise development or training materials development, which is cognitive task analysis. So that is sort of a foundational method for developing many training materials. You want to perform cognitive task analysis with experts to understand how experts perform a task. And then also, you could perform cognitive task analysis with novices to see how novices are doing it, maybe identifying common misconceptions and mistakes. And then you want to identify the gaps, and the instruction should target those weaknesses. And many times, experts might be able to perform the task well, but they cannot explain their rationale, like all of their decision-making criteria throughout the process. So it requires a person who is skilled in cognitive task analysis to talk to that expert to elicit all of their reasoning to perform the task. So I think AI might be at a point where it can do a task well, just as an expert who is proficient, but it still lacks the reasoning and all of the decision-making point on what I should do, like what are my considerations to make the decisions on how to do this. So I think in order to provide tutoring or training materials, it definitely requires expertise to guide, or I think it would be more efficient to have expertise embedded in the process so that we know what are the gaps between expert and novice performance to develop learning opportunities.
Okay, so let me go one level up on the provocative side. So a lot of faculty in the room at a university. We're talking largely about kind of faculty teaching. What's interesting about us as faculty is that we are experts, and I heard you say domain experts, both of you, but also we're teachers, and we are expected to be good teachers and or seek to improve our teaching. But I heard you both talk about domain experts, and I heard you talk about certification. So high stakes grading, credentialed grading. I didn't hear much about teaching, about pedagogy. And so actually, that's an interesting thought. Does this coming wave of generative AI have potential to disrupt our mission as individuals in higher ed, as faculty in higher ed, with respect to our teaching, changing us maybe perhaps into certifiers of knowledge and domain experts, but maybe not teachers?
I can go first. Um, yeah, it's a great question, and I think I tried to share a little bit when I was sharing about Course Builder, right? Uh, the way I see it is, I think pedagogy is also like a domain in itself, where expertise in that is going to continue to be important. The when I was preparing my talk, one of the things behind it was that there is like this back end and front end to learning, which is there is a lot of grounding pedagogy and content, and then there's the front end of like how you present that to a learner, right? So what I think this technology is doing and will continue to do is empower teachers to use that pedagogy and use that content to scale it to a lot more learners, because now they have more modes to use, right? Like audio or like the podcasting thing, right? That I showed. So I think it just empowers educators to have more tools to reach more learners.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I sometimes use ChatGPT when I'm preparing for my teaching as well. I think what it really helps is that I might have some content knowledge in the back of my head, but it may take me a while to retrieve it, or I would have to dig up some of my previous notes to like get it. But with Gen AI, it actually makes it much faster for me to put everything like in front of me and make it much faster for me to put together my slides and like other materials. I think what Gen AI might be lacking, I think Gen AI is much better on content knowledge than on pedagogical knowledge, perhaps because of the type of training data it is using. So I think if, let's say, Gen AI is helping us access content knowledge in a more efficient way, maybe it just gives us more capacity to focus on pedagogical design. So I would have more room to think about, okay, with this content, how should I deliver it in the most engaging way to the students?
So let me ask a question about Coach. I assume that there's some guardrails on Coach, that you can only ask certain topics, or that it keeps you kind of grounded in the course or something like that. I'm wondering, as a CTO, when people have access to ChatGPT, which has fewer guardrails. I mean, it has guardrails, right? But those guardrails aren't grounded in the course. We'll talk about lots of things. Is there a need for in-platform chat agents, conversational agents? Do you think that that's what we're doing now as we experiment, or do you think that that's going to be a steady state, that you'll have different kinds of agents in different kinds of software applications that support you in different ways versus I have my super agent, and my super agent supports me across the tasks that I'm doing, learning across platforms and so forth?
Yeah, I think, when we were building Coach initially, we did think about exactly what you're saying, right? Like, okay, what's the difference between why not just ask ChatGPT versus the context? And we actually did a lot of prototyping initially with different applications of this, chat interface. And one of the things we tried is, what if we give the grounding is actually the entire catalog, right? And that actually didn't result in good interactions. Like learner satisfaction was not that good because, or we didn't really roll it out. But when we were testing it internally, the answers weren't that great. So the more you ground it with expert knowledge, I think the more useful it becomes. And the other thing that was important was the context in which someone is using this is also important, right? So when you're in a course, you have that context and you want to talk about the course and not have it go in like different directions, right? And then yeah, lastly, what we've done is the grounding is we don't do any fine tuning, like I said, because we wanted to follow a lot of the AI principles that I shared. Um, but we do a lot of grounding in the course as well as some pre and post processing that helps coach really be relevant to that course. So in summary, I think yes, you can go to ChatGPT or like a more generic version, but we found it that when it's grounded in a certain context and a certain scenario, it's much more useful for learners.
How about you, Shu? What do you think about the idea of very task specific, or I'll call them program or vendor specific agents versus more general specific agents?
Yeah, I think uh, from my experience, I also felt like task-specific agent is going to perform better on a bunch of educational tasks. So we recently did a project where we were embedding some a chat agent into a science video to help high school students learn science. For example, this video is about mutation, and then the video would pause at a certain point, and the student can actually engage in a chat with the chat agent. And we did found that when we are using like a specific type of agent which has like very specific content knowledge about mutation, it is performing better than like when it does not feed that when we do not feed that context with the agent. So I think with the current development of with the current I guess generation of Gen AI we are seeing, it probably works better when we're doing like task specific agent. But I felt like this is something maybe Gen AI is evolving that can be better on like over time, where the generalizable model. I think this is what a lot of AI people are working on for generalized AI model to be good at specific tasks as well.
Yeah, I agree, and I wanted to add one more point about this is not about coach, but I also look at like a lot of different AI startups and which ones are having impact and which ones are struggling to show the value. And one of the things I've noticed as a pattern is that the task specific ones or the ones that are like this is for data scientists or this is for a sales team, right? Those tend to be more successful than a generic one, which is like, oh, this is an AI agent and you can ask it to do whatever, right? And then it struggles, right? So yeah, I do think right now the domain specific, task specific applications is the way to go.
So I'd like to just dip into the direction of the future of work and the tie between education and work. And I want to share two quick anecdotes on that, and then kind of open it up for your thoughts. So just on Tuesday, I was giving a lecture, and just an impromptu lecture on agents and using Microsoft's AutoGen, which allows you to generate a couple of agents and have them interact, each one being backed by an LLM. And they loved it. I loved it. And then we had to come up with a task to do. And so one of the tasks I came up with, well, faculty have to go up for tenure, then they have to have their documentation for tenure meticulously reviewed. Why don't I build a teaching philosophy agent that I can drop my teaching philosophy statement into, and it can tell me the pros, the cons. And what was really interesting about this as a task, especially co-creating this with the students as we were going through, is that it made very clear the rubric was very unclear, right? And of course, peer review, this is very common. So one of the interesting powers of Gen AI is that it shows us sometimes what we take for granted in social processes and in kind of internal knowledge. And to write good agents require or prompts requires you to really understand what you're asking about. And I've seen that actually start to appear in some job descriptions that are a little less convoluted than they maybe were. And right, so that's one observation. The other is a student in my class wanted to prep for job interviews and was asking for my help. And I said, well, I don't really know anything about interview. Like, I don't hire a lot of junior data scientists. So you're asking not the perfect person, but I'm a willing person. Let's go see if somebody tried to solve this already. And of course, there are several AI tools out there that you can use on Hugging Face, where you upload a job description, you give it some general characteristics, and then it grills you about questions in that. This seems to me to be very clear as an opportunity space for learners. So learners often come out of a course, they get a letter grade or a certificate, but they don't always know what they learned in that course, and they certainly don't know how to articulate it in a fair but generous way. These agents seem to be able to fill an interesting gap there. And just thoughts on agents, the future of work, and tying education into that are welcome.
Yeah, thanks for sharing these thoughts. Yeah, when you said the first thing, I had some related thoughts. The first point was when people have better domain knowledge, they're able to create better agents. Yeah, so I'm thinking maybe agents could also help people clarify the criteria or the rubrics that makes like a solution good or bad. So this is like when I interact with ChatGPT, like sometimes I might try my assignment prompts and see what ChatGPT is going to give me an answer on. And when I see the wrong answers, I would be clearer in my mind that this is wrong because something. So I think there might be a avenue where, let's say, AI agents can be leveraged to generate wrong answers, and it just helps experts to realize, to like make it clearer what are the criteria or what are the rubrics to evaluate a potential solution.
Yeah, agreed. And there's a couple of points that came to my mind while you were talking, Chris. Is also, when we think about how we go towards like Gen AI for work, right? There's two tracks that we have at Coursera, which is like there's Gen AI for everyone, which is you need to understand some fundamentals of the technology to be able to use it for any task. And then there's Gen AI for teams, which is again the domain specific one, right? And then I shared an example where when someone who's an L&D in the L&D team at work wants to roll out a very personalized learning plan for their organization, they can actually use generative AI to create that personalized learning plan. I think it works great at that. And then you shared the example on the resume. That's really interesting. I think that I'll share another one which I heard about while listening to one of the talks on Notebook LM, which is people were using I think if you've seen that podcast feature, so there's this thing at work that people often do, which is they have their check-in with their manager about a self-reflection that they do, right? So what folks started doing is that they use that self-reflection and then they turn it into a podcast to listen to that conversation, to practice what it'd be like to talk to their manager. And that increased their confidence in terms of preparing for that conversation and having a more successful outcome from that conversation. And also it was like a good pep talk on yourself, right? When you do something like that, and listening to that can be good. So just wanted to share another example. What you said.
Yeah, I like that. Even better if we can voice and video clone, and then that clone can have the interaction with the manager, and I could just get back to work. So I'm looking over. Do we maybe have time for an audience question or a couple of questions from the audience?
Yeah, we have 5 or 6 minutes. We have a few questions. I'll start back here. Ahmed.
Hi, good morning, Mustafa. Thank you for sharing all that. Always pleasure to see new data and news coming from Coursera. I'm Ahmed. I'm a senior learning experience designer here at the University of Michigan Center for Academic Innovation. So on a daily basis, I design courses for Coursera for the most time. I'm glad that you started your keynote and presentation with McKinsey. I do not have a very critical opinion of McKinsey, like John Oliver, for example, for those of you who watched the video. But I do have a little bit of critical opinion of McKinsey, specifically having studied their Future of Work report, the last one about 2020, and COVID said, hold my drink, McKinsey. So now that we have learned all the lesson, we, education stakeholders, Coursera is included, of not trusting McKinsey's prediction in the future and thinking of possible disruption that could happen to us that make things that we take for granted disrupted easily, like the idea of going to campus to study. We took that for granted, and COVID came and said, that's not going to happen. And those who thought online learning is a hype, boy, oh boy, we're wrong. So thinking of future disruptions, on the top of my mind, wars on energy that say Gen AI is expensive, it costs a lot of energy, we're going to pull the plug on it. Like we pulled the plug on the Concorde, for example. That's a possibility. So thinking of any other possible disruption in the futures, what Coursera have planned for that? When we get to the point where taking Gen AI for granted, like walking to campus to listen to Professor Brooks give us a lecture, is not possible. What contingency plans do you have? Would love to learn from that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll maybe address 2 points. Like one is the McKinsey research, right? And I actually agree with you, because one of the things that we started with was that, well, so there was some research that showed or that predicted that all software engineers will be like 30% more productive, when in reality, because of generative AI, whereas in reality that was not actually true in practice, right? And I talked to a lot of other CTOs, and the reality is that yes, it helps you use it as a tool, but it's not. And then the other aspect that was not covered there was, when you think about any role, and let's say software engineering, for example, you cannot assume that 100% of the time is spent writing code. It's actually only 30%, right? 70% actually doing a lot of other things, right? So yeah, you're right on the research. On the disruption part, I see it as more, we keep applying this technology in intentional ways to test the impact and see where it empowers learners, educators a lot, versus like a big bang impact that we are predicting. And what we're seeing is, even in the last question we answered on Gen AI for work, it is many of the different roles are already using generative AI in their workflows now, right? And in some cases, like copywriting, there is more disruption than in some other roles within the workplace. So yeah, there is and I think I read a recent study on as audio is becoming more and more of a medium, right? Industries like call centers are getting more disruptive, right, because of that technology. So I think the application will be incremental. There'll be some areas where there'll be larger disruption, but I think the way to tackle it is to use the technology in intentional ways to test the impact.
Yeah, if I could just chime in, I think one of the differences is the amazing accessibility of Gen AI, of the top Gen AI models. ChatGPT is $20 a month. That's an incredible accessibility. And if you think about some of the other technologies that have been amazing and that we've shelved, like the Concorde, or one would say things like nuclear power, there's a huge cost to those technologies, not just the environmental cost in both of these cases, but actually a cost to the users of those, whether it's governments building them or people trying to fly on them. And it's amazing that ChatGPT is $20 a month. Although Gemini is $20 a month, ChatGPT is $20 a month, Mistral's $20 a month, right? Like they start to add up. And as you start, this was part of my question in interest about, will we have one agent, or for every application that we use, will we be paying $20 a month for access? That'll be a detail that gets worked out. Is Coach $20 a month?
It's part of Coursera Plus, which
That was for you to be like, no, of course not. That was,
but I
we
agree
call
with,
that a soft pitch.
I think it's the subscriptions add up, so I agree.
Do we have time for another
We
question?
could probably do one more quick question if there's one. One taker. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Laura. She had her hand up first. Maybe you have the same question.
Hi. So I'm kind of curious about how learners will experience Gen AI content in terms of knowing that it's been developed probably using Gen AI technologies, the proliferation of media-rich resources like podcasts or whatever it might be. Has there been any research, or do you know of any sort of early indicators of how learners are responding to content that's been developed by Gen AI? I say this because, as educators, as instructors, we want to show our learners that we care. So a lot of what we do is kind of like the feedback that we provide and all of that is designed to help them feel like this has been developed for them by us. So I'm just wondering if you have any sense of how learners react. Do they stop caring after they realize it's all Gen AI produced?
So I'm just going to share a couple of quick thoughts there because, Rebecca, I am very aligned on a number of those things. When I phone a company and it's clearly like a bot, I mean, I'm just spamming like #0 operator agent, right? Like I just want to talk to a person because I'm so convinced my problem is unique. That's why I picked up a phone in the first place and called. And I really worry about this. The chat interface, in my perspective, is something we should limit because it'll scream, this is an agent. And embedding these as smart features in our software, I believe, is a good way forward. Nobody really hates, I think, Google's auto suggest as you're writing an email because you just hit tab to take it or don't, right? And it doesn't feel like an intelligence, but frankly, it's built on the exact same fundamentals underneath. And I think as we mature with Gen AI and use of Gen AI, some of the most successful places we'll see it are places where we haven't turned it into an agent, made it look like a human, and that it's just a feature of the tool. What do you both think?
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think, and I read this interesting thing about like as these AI models get more and more training data, a larger percentage of that will actually be content that was generated by AI itself, right? And so this can lead to a kind of a cycle of the content quality becoming lower and lower as that happens. And I feel like in that space, actually trusted content that is created by experts again gets actually more valuable. And then I also want to share an example of, similar to what you said with the phone example is, we have some compliance courses that we have to take, and one of them was like AI generated, and, people immediately noticed that, and, the engagement was not as great because it was like actually an AI generated video with AI generated voice, and it was very clear that that was the case versus an actual video.
I think if the materials is if the material is assigned by instructor, let's say in a formal education context, I think it needs to be verified by the instructor to make sure that the content is correct and is actually good, beneficial for the students. But I felt like Gen AI could fill the gap. Let's say when instructors are not available and the students are in their learning moment, then they can use these tools for help. But I felt like if there's something that is officially assigned, it needs to be verified.
And as an example, maybe as to where this might go, learners often judge their learning experiences. So I'm talking about course evals now. They judge their learning experiences in part based on how we judge them. So if we grade them based on effort, sometimes they grade us based on perceived effort. And I've had pushback why are these videos 2 years old? Well, because nothing's changed in statistics in 2 years. But it was an example where they observed what they perceived to be a lack of effort on our part. And so it is complex. That's not necessarily about the learning, but of course, if they're demotivated, now it is about the learning because motivation and learning are tied.
Yeah, I think we're good. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the panel, Mustafa, Shu, and Chris.